Chapter 2, Preparing for the Hike.
There is no better way for a pastor to protect himself, his feelings, and his ego than to wrap himself in a sermon and hide behind the pulpit. That is what I did. I must admit that I made a good case for why and how I would exit, but some of my stuff was too painful to realize.
This journey was a physical, spiritual, and emotional pilgrimage. Each step on the Appalachian Trail became a metaphor for the struggles and revelations of life. Walking through the dense forests and rugged terrains, I found moments of profound clarity where the solitude allowed me to confront my fears, doubts, and hopes. At times, the path felt endless, but it was in those very stretches of uncertainty where faith grew, where the understanding of God's will deepened. The trail became a mirror, reflecting my strengths and the vulnerabilities I had been too hesitant to acknowledge.
In those quiet hours, under the canopy of stars or amidst the morning mist, I began to piece together the fragmented parts of myself, reconciling the pastor, the father, the husband, and the seeker. Each sunrise brought a renewed sense of purpose, and each challenge on the trail reminded me of the grace that sustains us even in our weakest moments. It was as if the footsteps carried my body forward and my spirit toward a greater understanding of what it means to surrender completely to divine guidance. It was painful that I had come to the end of a rich ministry, but it was too much to bear that there was no place to go professionally when I knew my capabilities. But I designed a clever way to do something for myself, as well as to protect my feelings and save face when I didn't have another church that wanted my services. Here is how I said it. When it's time for you to go. But the man who does the will of God lives forever. I John 2:15-17. The most common question I have received has been, how do you find, know, and do the will of God? This question often arises when folks decide on a career or seek a mate. There are other crucial times when one is profoundly concerned about knowing the will of God. In that context, everything I say today can be applied whether you are a guest, a new member, or one who has always been in this church, especially for the past 15 years. The last 6 months have been a time when I have wrestled with God to know His will. For several months, I've known that what I am saying today was required of me if I continued doing God's will for my life. Many will misunderstand or misinterpret my words. I will complete my work as pastor of McDonough Road Baptist Church on Sunday morning, March 21st, 1999. If you've asked how I know the will of God for my life, you have met the first requirement. First, a person must be interested in God. That means you've acknowledged that God is, and you want to obey Him. Seeking God is the first step. Secondly, when you discover and find God's will, when it comes to you, this is what God wants me to do. You may ask, you want me to do what? You're not finished with this process until you obey what God wants you to do. Many have discovered God's will but are unwilling to follow or do it. This has been the process for me for the last several months. I opened the subject of resigning my work here and walking the Appalachian Trail with Willin several months ago. First, I asked if I was in a good mood. She said, not really. Then I said, I will wait to talk with you when you are in a good mood. Her womanly curiosity about wanting to hear this conversation was so intense that she was quickly healed by her bad mood. I told her, wouldn't it be a little strange when our grandchildren arrive? For you to tell them you'll have to wait to meet your grandfather because he is hiking the Appalachian Trail? I asked her what she thought, and she said, why don't you take a hike? So I decided that now would be the time to do what I've wanted to do for several years, walk the Appalachian Trail. I will begin that trip on Thursday, March 25th, when I complete my responsibilities here on Sunday morning, March 21st. It'll take me 6 or 7 months to complete the walk. I am not retiring. I am rewiring. I aim to retire in 2006, I've revised this date, which I hope to achieve. I don't know what to do when I return from the hike, but I've trusted the Lord thus far, and I'm not stopping now. There's a Winn-Dixie, it went out of business and closed, within walking distance of my home. I've worked for a living before, and if necessary, I can do it again. Or I can find Eric Rudolph, he hasn't been found, and collect the $1 million reward. Worse, he will find me, and Willen will collect $250,000. I'm still living. I'm sure you are asking the question, how did you arrive at this decision? I don't think it is ever easy to discover the will of God. God's will has never been revealed in a blinding light or a question devoid of the step of faith. I've heard the old saying, catch the gleam, follow the bent, and go in the open door. That saying lends itself to evaluating who you are, your talents, strengths, weaknesses, goals, dreams, and temperament. God knows who you are and what you are equipped to do. I considered all those things in prayerful retreats. I gradually understood that this was God's will for my life. There is no safer place than to be in God's will, even if it is on the Appalachian Trail. It is exceedingly difficult for us to end our work here at such an exciting time in the history of this congregation. In a sermon some months ago, I said something you didn't fully understand the significance of. I remarked that the Lord had a sense of humor at the timing of things in life. God has directed me to this decision on the precipice of the most exciting period in our church's history. In my worldly thoughts, I thought how exciting it would be to be 38 again, with the opportunity to lead this congregation. When I was seeking the Lord's will and coming here in 1984, the future of this church was much brighter in your eyes than it was for others. I sought counsel from other preachers in the area. Some of them said, "You are crazy to go there." Preachers in the region understood the reality of what our church faced. Some would not tackle the chore. Some said, "You were crazy when I came." It was interesting when Doug Inglis was here a few weeks ago. He told me, "Anybody that would leave McDonough Road Baptist Church is crazy." When I said earlier in the sermon that I'm walking the Appalachian Trail, some of you asked the question in your mind, "Are you crazy?" So I realized that in 15 years, nothing has changed. I'm still crazy in the eyes of some. In the eyes of some, I was crazy to go. And now, I am crazy in the eyes of others because I'm leaving, and others because of what I will be doing. Some of you will ask me later why I'm leaving. The natural and only reason is that I know that it is the Lord's will for me to conclude my work here. I hope this is a midlife crisis. If it is, that means I'll live to be 106. For those of you who are visitors, I'm including my resignation in the context of seeking, finding, and doing the will of God. It is not in my timing or how I planned it, but I know it suits me. I would never hope to serve a finer congregation than this one. I'm not perfect, and this church is not ideal, but it comes as close to being a perfect 15 years as I could hope for, and far better than I deserve. All my children but 3 wanted to be here today. We have only 3 children. Each of them wanted to be here. Since I told them my plans, they have encouraged me by helping me plan my Appalachian Trail walk. Jody bought me a tent. I received a precious card from her yesterday, which I have in my coat pocket, because it reminds me that she supports me where she is. Others in the family have given me needed supplies for the walk. Kristen, the newest addition to our family, asked me if I wanted them to be here. I said, "Not unless you want to see a grown man cry." It reminded me of an old joke. John was learning to drive a big 16-wheeler that required 2 drivers. One drives while the other sleeps. During his training, he went through rigorous questioning. He was given various scenarios to evaluate his judgment skills. One was if he was driving at night, facing a bad accident. It was described as coming down a big hill and facing another truck coming his way, with no way out of a head-on collision. He was asked what he would do. He said, "I would wake up Joe, his partner." The question was asked, "Why would you wake up Joe?" Joe had never seen anything like this before. Kristen is here because she has never seen anything like this before. Each member of my family supports this decision. I spoke with my dad last night, telling him about my plans. He asked, "How long have you been there?" I told him almost 15 years ago. He said, That's about as long as a preacher should be anywhere. Dr. Pierce Harris, a legendary Methodist preacher of a past generation, said that the Methodists strangely did things about churches and ministry. He said, "When I was beginning and didn't know how to serve one church, they gave me 7. When I finally completed my college and seminary work, I thought I could manage the 7 churches. They gave me 1. I know that I'm at my best as a preacher and pastor. I've practiced ministry now for 35 years. I know how to serve a church and will not have one now. But I'm on the Lord's timetable. And I believe if I walk by faith, and you as well, very soon all of us will see how the Lord has time for this occasion for the good of us all and his work here and wherever I'll continue serving him." Someone asked me if someone was giving you grief, and I said, yes. But I quickly said, the steeple is leaking. The heating and cooling are too hot and cold. The sound is too loud and soft. And yes, someone is always upset with the preacher. Those 4 things I've learned in 35 years of ministry are constant in any church weekly. That will never change, but that is why I'm taking my walk. The reason is that I sought, found, and am doing the will of God for my life. Other churches have considered me during my tenure here. At other times, when it would have been desirable to leave, I stayed because I knew that it was the Lord's will. Recently, another congregation considered me for their pastor, but not for exceptionally long. I characterize my years of serving this congregation in the following way. You needed us. I needed to pastor, and you needed a pastor. You nurtured us, and we have raised our family here. You served as models and mentors to each of our children. How they conduct themselves and live today results from the caring nurture you gave our family. There is no way that I can put a value on that. You nudged us to do better, to seek our best, and to be ourselves. Only a few of you have wanted us to be something other than who we are. That's your problem, not ours. After preaching this service, I planned to slip out during the closing prayer. I didn't want to answer any further questions or deal with my heartbreak. Until then, I could always count on Jack Ford for a long prayer. So I called on Jack, expecting enough time to disappear during the prayer. But Jack let me down. He was so shocked by my announcement and troubled by it that he didn't want to pray. He said, "Lord, we are shocked by what our pastor has told us, and I don't know what to pray." Amen. I had enough time to pick up my speed and escape without talking to anyone. Willen followed close behind me, but Jeffrey and Kristen had to face folks, and I know they represented us well. In the 2 months following my resignation, I tried explaining my reasoning and thoughts about my actions. I had individual conferences and spoke to other congregations and groups about my adventure. It was refreshing for me to have the ears of so many caring and interested people. The following is an attempt to interpret what I'm doing to others. Taking care of me. Isaiah 30:18-26. It is a selfish thing I'm doing, taking 6 months for myself. There are many folks making sacrifices for me to make this 6-month trip, but you must admit I'm doing it on a low budget, approximately $1 per mile. Some of you would say that the church is making a sacrifice that always builds my ego, but I live with no illusion about how important I am to this process. Perhaps you recall me telling you they replaced me when I left Vienna First Baptist Church in 10 weeks. When I came to this church, my family stayed in Dublin until school was out. When I returned home the first week, I was away. Willeen and the children waited for me in the driveway. The second week, when I returned home, I went to the end of the house and announced that I was home before I got an acknowledgement that I was home. I found a note in the third week telling me they would be home shortly. I stopped making notes after that. I've watched the world move forward in the face of the deaths of some significant people. Life is that flowing stream that keeps moving regardless of who lives, dies, or moves on. Because I am taking time for myself now, I believe that the future congregations I serve will have a better pastor. Willen is sacrificing. She will keep on working while I'm playing. The separation will be a sacrifice for me, but I believe that she will have a better husband when I return. The children will have a better father, and the world will have a better person. I trust that those making sacrifices will see dividends returned by their sacrifice. Let me talk with you about the importance of taking care of me. I ask that you apply these concepts to your life. Drilled into my head came the phrase, if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else will. That was not meant in my background as a statement that led to selfishness or greed, but it was meant to be a statement of personal responsibility. Through the years, I've seen many pastors do good work and then ruin it through self-destruction. I've seen the times when consciously I wanted to self-destruct, but often I've done unconsciously. I believe how you finish a life or an occupation may be more important than how you begin. What does one do when recognizing the need to retreat to advance? There are times when pastors will decide to retool and get more education. I've been there and done that. I've come to see that my best gifts are not in training shepherds, but in tending sheep. I wouldn't want a more fulfilling job than serving a church as a pastor. Therefore, I've got enough formal education to accomplish that. Others do what I'm doing, which is we retreat so that later we can advance. As we retreat, we recoup so that we have something to give. There was a misstatement in the article in a local paper that said, I'm not returning to the pulpit. That is wrong. I will return to the pulpit a better person and a preacher than I am. So let me talk with you about taking care of me. I've been to 2 recent clinics on walking the AT. Several people walked around it and shared information about preparation with us. Each one was there to encourage others to do it. Their purpose was to share how to make it a successful walkthrough, understand the trail, and prepare for the challenge and its beauty. The trail begins at Springer Mountain near Amicalola Falls in North Georgia. It goes through 14 states, ending at Baxter State Park in Maine at Katahdin, the highest mountain. It is 2,160 miles, but who's counting? It is not the number of miles traveled that is important, but the joy one has while traveling. I have as my goal to complete it in 6 months. For 180 days, it will be my job to get up and walk at least 12 miles. The nature of the trail. Each traveler should know what he has to see and what properly belongs to him on a journey. Goethe. A traveler without knowledge is a bird without wings. Sadi, the AT's origin, can be traced to writings in 1921 by Benton McKay, a regional planner, forester, and conservationist. He conceived this trail as part of a social experiment to make the world more inhabitable. His trial would allow urban workers to rejuvenate themselves and reorient their philosophical view of participation in the industrial age. McKay believed workers should view their labor as life rather than an end. And one way to achieve that change in focus was by getting back to the land. The Appalachian Trail, Jan D. Curran, pp. 17 to 18. My trail name is Hobab. Hobab, is a personal name that means beloved or cunning. Father-in-law of Moses. Numbers 10:29, Judge 4:11. Some uncertainty exists concerning the identity of Moses' father-in-law. Jethro, example, 3-1, 18-2, and Reuel, Exodus. 2:16 are also given as names for the father-in-law of the great lawgiver. Several explanations have been offered. Some say that diverse groups within Israel handed down the story of Moses in oral tradition, with different names for his father-in-law. Others say Reuel and Jethro were different names for the same person, while Hobab was the son of Reuel or Ragel, Numbers 10:29, and thus the brother-in-law of Moses. Others say that the Hebrew term for father-in-law has the more general meaning of related by marriage. Moses urged Hobab to accompany the Israelites through the wilderness as a guide. See Moses, Jethro, and Reuel. The trail community. One of the through hikers described life on the trail. He said you get to know the hikers who start with you. You know those who are always a day or two behind you, and those who are a couple of days ahead of you. If you get off the trail, the stream of hikers keeps moving on. When you return to the trail, You suddenly find yourself among strangers. You don't know anyone because those you knew have moved on. You feel longing. Trail magic. Everyone who walks the trail has remarkable stories about the kindness of others, or a surprise that makes them believe in trail magic. While attending a clinic last week, someone asked the presenters to share their best story about trail magic. One guy talked about coming into a shelter in Maine. 5 minutes after he arrived, his brother called his name. The trials of the trail, the length. I must cover 2,160 miles in 180 days. Each day, I will walk an average of 12 miles. I believe there will be a difference when I walk more than 12 miles. There will be days when I do not want to get out of bed, just like at home. The conditioning. According to those who are experienced through hikers, in the first 30 days, the walk will be 90% physical. The following 5 months will be primarily mental. It is one of those mind over matter tricks that kick in. You've got to want to do it. I don't know how badly I want to do it, but I am committed to doing my best. Willeen says that I can come home if I don't complete it. That's a better deal than my father gave me when I left home. He told me I couldn't come home. The obstacles. Through hikers' lament. Some days I get lost thinking while my legs steadily walk on. Other times I soar with my spirit and my feet quietly tag along. But today all I'm doing is a body haunting this big, heavy pack. And although I keep trying, there is no denying that 40 pounds sit on my back. Walk on, a cosmic Yankee. 1. What do you do when it rains? You walk. What about the cold and heat? You walk. Do you get blisters on your feet? You walk. Unless it is an irreparable injury, you walk. When you're tired, hungry, discouraged, lonesome, you walk. That's the reality of life. You keep doing what is required each day, whatever obstacles you encounter. The tale of the trail and the trials. Now, I've learned through the eyes of others, but when I experience myself, I will have a story I can tell. I've already met and spoken with some fascinating and helpful people who have a passion for hiking and a desire for others to have the joy they've found in experiencing the Appalachian Trail. The tendencies of ministers, self-destruction, cannibalism, destroying others, etc. Those who've walked the trail say, do it. They encourage and persuade others to try it. However, those who've not done it, or perhaps have only thought about it, are the negatives, naysayers, who will explain why you shouldn't and why you are crazy for doing it. It's interesting how people respond when they learn that I've resigned. They are as uncomfortable as we are approaching someone who is divorced. We don't know whether to offer our condolences or our congratulations. Lay people are better at this than preachers. We don't know how to view someone resigning from a church when all is going well within that church. We want the second shoe to drop or something worse to surface that we've not heard about. I practiced walking with a 50-pound backpack on public roads. Passers-by gave me curious looks. Some even tried to recognize me. At the junction of County Line Road and McDonough Road, a woman seemed apprehensive and locked her car doors as I approached. I felt like telling her she had no reason to worry and it'd look better if she applied her makeup before leaving home. To avoid being seen, I wait until there's no traffic when I leave or return from my morning walk to prevent alarming my neighbors. You're asking, why would anyone do such a thing? There are rewards. 1. There's something mysterious about walking in the beauty of God's creation each day. 2. There is the adventure of making such a trip. I'm a curious person. I like to challenge myself to see if I can do it. 3. Only about 300 people each year accomplish this goal. Therefore, if I complete the journey, I will do something that only a few people ever do. 4. I will grow in the dimensions that Jesus grew in Luke 2:52 as he developed. Physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. I passionately believe that I will be a better person for having made this trip. It took me 4 years to learn to fly. I'm counting only 6 months to learn to walk. Conclusion. I have an extensive list of don't leave home without it. This first list is a short one and a light one. I'm convinced that one can do his best traveling light on the Appalachian Trail. There are many things that I've been that I should take. However, another list is don't leave home with it. Some people began their trip carrying camcorders, televisions, and two-burner Coleman stoves. Too many people take things they think they can't live without. The secret to traveling is traveling light. I now understand what Jesus meant when he told the disciples not to take anything with them. Then there's another list of things that I've made. It's the list of things not to come back with. There are some things that I trust I will leave behind because of this journey. I talked to a minister's group before taking the trip. I recently realized a dream that I had for many years. For the past 4 years, I've received 135 hours of individual instruction for flying an airplane and spent $12,000 to earn a pilot's license. I spent more money, individual instruction time, and many hours to achieve this dream than I did on preparation for ministry. I gave more attention to learning to fly than to learning to pastor. I wouldn't be speaking here today if I weren't doing something crazy in some folks' minds, and very crazy in other folks' minds. I'm one of us. I think, respond, feel, and act like a preacher. Some of you are waiting for the other shoe to drop. What is this guy saying? Indeed, he knows I don't believe he chose to take a hike. I'm not dropping another shoe, but I will explain what I'm doing in more detail. There is no more to the story than doing something I want. From the beginning, let me say that I am grieving today. Separation from a church is not easy, as most of you know. After 35 years of almost continuous pastoral responsibilities and 15 years with the same congregation, I would not be honest if I did not admit that my heart was breaking. I know the burden, boredom, and blessings of being a shepherd. I know less than most of you, nor more than each of you. Each of you could say of my experiences as a pastor, I've been there and done that. Some of the reasons I've chosen to do what I'm doing now come from timing. It is the right time. A friend who shares the dream of walking the trail was in a church recently, and I said, "Why don't you join me on the part of the trail?" He said, "The timing is not right." For me, the timing is right. A little curious, but right. The church I'm serving transitioned from 1500 Norman Drive, where Christian Fellowship, served by Emmanuel McCall, now lives, to our present location at 352 McDonough Road, Fayetteville, Georgia. We moved into new facilities 5 years ago in March, after living with Christian Fellowship for 2 years in the same facility. On March 7th, we dedicated a new sanctuary, and I will complete my work on March 21st and begin my walk on Thursday, March 25th, with my youngest son, Jason. Jason married a year and a half ago. He can't stay separated from his wife as long as I can, so he will walk with me for a few weeks. My wife, our oldest son, his wife, and our daughter will join me on the walk at other times. Yes, I know that I'm living with fantasy. When I was about to leave home as a young adult, I thought it would be the greatest thing in the world to be on my own. When I left home after college, it was the day I had dreamed of for so long, but it was not what I had thought it would be. As I left for the New Orleans seminary, the first time on my own, I didn't feel free. I was depressed. I wept for much of the journey to New Orleans. Most pastors dreamed of the day they would become a church pastor and be loved by everyone in their congregation. Everyone would understand and accept us because we answered the call to such noble work. A youth went with our church on a habitat project in Americus, Georgia. It was our first time spending time together and getting acquainted. He asked me how I liked being a pastor. I told him. He said, "It must be nice having a job, knowing everyone likes you and no one ever gets angry with you." Many of us came to the ministry because of that great need to find some place where we were needed and loved. Unfortunately, we often meet our own needs but no one else's. Some of the other reasons that I will verbalize reveal more of how I came to see this as the will of God for my life. I spent time training some of my men in a program I developed called the Master's Men. One of our sessions was based on the Luke 2:52 principle of balancing life. Jesus grew in 4 dimensions, as described in that passage. He grew in mind, body, socially, and spiritually. When one keeps those areas of life balanced, they can manage whatever life brings them. To illustrate that point, I use a standard electrical fan with 4 fan blades. When those 4 blades are perfectly balanced, the fan will perform well but wobble if one is heavier. Wobbling fans are not as efficient as balanced ones and are not enjoyable. We use indicators as forecasters for the future. The Farmer's Almanac often predicts the weather by citing certain things observed in nature that indicate what is coming. Economists forecast the future with what they identify as leading economic indicators. We view the weather forecaster's daily tips on what we can expect from the weather and often plan our day with that in mind. As sophisticated as the weather forecasters are, they cannot accurately predict many days. I sensed some indicators that led me to consider walking the Appalachian Trail. Rather than calling them indicators, I will use an analogy from my flight training. Many days I flew to the training area to practice maneuvers. One that I would not say I like to practice is power on and power off stalls, but each one is important to know if you experience one of them. Most plane accidents occur during takeoffs and landings. The power on stall simulates the takeoff condition of the plane, and the power off stall simulates the landing mode of the aircraft. To practice these maneuvers, I climb to an altitude where I can recover safely, but each stall has a spin risk. Spin recovery is not a required experience for a private license, but you must have spin recovery knowledge because you run the risk in these spinning maneuvers. A stall warning device on the plane does the obvious. It warns you of an impending stall. When the warning occurs, you know that if you do not take action, the plane will fall out of the sky because it no longer has sufficient lift to maintain flight. If you do not take immediate action, it will spin toward the ground without enough altitude to recover. Everyone will assimilate a different list that I interpret as leading indicators that it was time to let go of the people, place, position, and passion I have shepherded for the past 15 years. The changing of the rules for performance, the rising level of expectations, visitation, smiles, exciting sermons, etc. The lack of increasing compensation for the number of years of service and the achievements completed. The increasing numbers who challenge leadership, those who want to tell you about the lack of growth in the church, etc. A plane can only enter a spin motion if one of the wings stalls. If immediate action is not taken, one wing stalling only puts an aircraft in a spin attitude, resulting in a crash. There are emergency procedures, lost procedures, and other scenarios that one must practice or anticipate what they will do when they occur. Learning to take care of yourself, recognizing the stall warnings, and knowing what action to take to prevent a crash is essential. Some other thoughts are going apart before you come apart and crashing before your computer does. One does these things when they get lost while piloting a plane: climb, communicate, confess, and comply. Isasasib si samsibilbun. The workers in our new sanctuary noticed my habit of exercising each day. Some of them kept track of when I left and returned, and I established relationships with many of them. When he learned I was walking the Appalachian Trail, one asked me, "Is that the Trail of Tears?" No, it is not now, but it will likely be before I return in defeat or victory. Attention, altitude, and attitude are essential modes that a pilot must be constantly aware of. Otherwise, he will endanger himself or others. Before I earned my pilot's license, I could not carry other passengers, except my instructor. With my endorsement, I could fly solo. But only when I was a certified pilot could I legally carry others on the plane. Too often, we are not certified before ministers are ready to carry passengers. Too many failed pastors and churches result from not recognizing the stall warning signals alerting us to the danger of a stall. When we realize something is wrong, we are not trained to take action to avert a stall. Every landing that a pilot walks away from is a good one. Sometimes, pastors should be aware of the stall warning system that tells us that if we do not take corrective action, we will spin out of control and crash. Too many have crashed because they were not trained to recognize the warning signs. Others know the warning signs but do not know what to do. Those who see the warning signs but ignore them are the ones that I have no confidence in because there is a lack of character. A former preacher who received the call and training but later moved on stated, "Just because you are not paranoid doesn't mean they are not talking about you. Like most of you, I feel like I have been through a divorce. I'm married to the woman I fell in love with 43 years ago. I'm not speaking of marital divorce, but church separation. My separation from churches can be described as delightful and devastating. This divorce is devastating. That is one of the reasons that I need to take a hike. I'm leaving because it is the right time for both of us. I use this analogy with my single daughter. I told her that being close would be like being divorced from the woman I love, and then having to watch her court and remarry. That would be too painful for me. She said, I cannot identify with what you are saying, but I think most of you will. I'm separating from a congregation I love, but the leading indicators identified things that made me aware that it was time to leave. Knowing nature, I realized I could not be close to the time and place of my replacement. I said, what are some of the indicators? When the secretary must ask for your name. Discovering that your sermon was deleted from the Sunday bulletin is not good. In the next chapter, Jason and I start the hike at Springer Mountain.